Okay, so welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about ratio, rates, and unit rate. This video might be a little bit longer because I'm talking about a quick review over all three: ratio, rates, and unit rates. So let's go ahead and get started with things that you should know. Things that you should know. Ratios can be written in a colon, the word to, or as a fraction. Remember, of course, since it can be written as a fraction, we would need to reduce or simplify it just like a real fraction. Per, each, for one are just a few words that represent unit rate. And rate and unit rate key operation usually is division. Once you divide and find the cost for one, you can usually multiply to find the cost for the others. Let's move into some practice. Let's quickly review some key vocabulary as well. So, of course, we need to know what each definition is before we get started. A ratio is a comparison of two quantities by division. Again, those are just quantities, so they're just going to be numbers. Okay, so in this case, if I was to look at a problem like this, we know that 17 out of 20 students, or 17 over 20, represents the ratio. And again, remember with ratio, it has to go in order. This case, we're comparing 17 out of the 20 total students, so 17 over 20. Let's go ahead, rate. A rate is a special type of ratio comparing two quantities, usually similar to miles per hour, pay per hour, or something like that. And our last one is unit rate. And it's just like that, one unit out of that rate. We want to simply simplify it to find out when the denominator is 1, how much we have driven. In this case, if we look at the example, driving 120 miles in 2 hours. So again, we want to figure out how much they drove in 1 hour or per hour. I would go 120 divided by 2, and in this case, this person was driving 60 miles per hour or in 1 hour. Let's go ahead and let's do some ratio. So in this case, let's just practice and quickly review a little bit about ratios. So again, all ratio is comparing two items, making sure that we go in a particular order. Whatever order they're asking us in, that's the order we have to write. And then secondly, remember, if it can be simplified or reduced, we need to do so. Let's look at these practice questions. So in the first ratio, we're looking for ratio of cars to trucks. So in this case, we're going to count how many cars to how many trucks. 1, 2, 3, 4 cars. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trucks. And remember, it can be written in any way. And I'll just practice writing all 3 ways. Let's look at the next one. So the next one, I want the total vehicles, so the total amount of vehicles or transportation to cars. Let's look at. So first we would need to know my total. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 total. 11 to how many cars? 1, 2, 3, 4 cars. Trucks to boats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trucks to 1, 2 boats. Okay, and now let's look at our last one. We already know the total number of transportation that I have or vehicles that I have is 11, and we already know the total amount of boats is 2. We're just switching the order. So in this case, 2 to 11, 2 over 11, and 2 using the word to 11. Now, let's move on and let's talk a little bit about rate and ratios. Joy Joy ran 36 miles in 6 days. If she ran at a constant amount, how many miles did she run in one day? So again, we know constant just means the same amount. So if she ran the same amount of times or the same amount of miles each day, how much did she run in one day? So we again know that 36 over 6 would be my ratio. Let's write that down. We would get my rate by writing down what are we comparing. So let's look at that next. Write a verbal model of what are we comparing. Substitute the values in each given quantity. And then since the unit rate has a denominator of 1, divide it and figure out, this is how we use to figure out my unit rate. So again, we're comparing miles over days, 36 over 6. So that means I'm simply just plugging in what we know. And then, of course, I would divide to find my unit rate. So this represents my rate, and this represents my unit rate. Why? Because it's in one day. So Joy ran 6 miles per day. So just being able to, one, determine the difference between the three and being able to find each three. Let's go ahead, let's move on to some more practice. A 12-pack of Gatorade costs $13.44. What is the unit price per bottle? Again, that word unit is telling me we want the cost for one bottle of Gatorade, or per, or one. So in this case, let's determine what my ratio is. The same thing we did before. Remember, ratio is just numbers. We're just comparing two things, the cost and how many Gatorades per pack. So $13.44 and a pack of 12. This would be my ratio. Now remember, my rate is just the same thing as a ratio, but it's letting me know in units, what are we comparing? We're comparing, of course, cash or money to how many bottles, or the cost of bottles. This will represent my rate. Now, in order to find my unit rate, I would simply divide those two things together. So, and remember that line means divide. So 1344 divided by 12, that will determine what my unit rate is. So in this case, it's $1.12 per bottle. Let's take it a step further. Let's say if I wanted to figure out how much it would be for 5 bottles, I would just take how much it costs for one and multiply it by 5. That's 10, 6, 5. So in this case, 5 bottles would cost me $5.60. Let's move on to one last practice question. Our last example, we're going to look at the better buy. This is a real life situation. When you're going shopping and you want to figure out what would be the better buy for something, we always determine the better buy or the better value by the lowest cost. So once we divide and find the unit rate for each one, which one has the cheaper unit rate? That's how we determine which one is the better buy. So let's look at this example. The price of 3 different bags of French fries are shown in the table. Which bag has the lowest price? So again, here goes my unit rate for each one. So I would just simply go $4.83 divided by 3.5. And again, that would tell me how much it costs per pound for each bag of fries. Let's look at the example. On the first option, it would be $1.38 because I took $4.83 and divided it by 3.5. Let's look at our other option. For the 7-pound bag, it would be $1.35 per pound, or 1 pound. And then the 20-pound bag, $27.20 divided by 20. And in that case, I got $1.36 per pound. So in this case, which one would be my cheaper buy? The 7-pound bag. Why? Because it's the cheaper price. Let's look at one last thing before I give you two practice questions to try independently. Let's go ahead. We're almost done. So now let's look at our last two things. How do we determine unit rate and rate when we're on a table and graph? It's very simple. Of course, we know we're looking for the amount for one of something. So you automatically look at your graph or your table and see if it specifies the amount for one. If it doesn't, you find you an equivalent ratio off the ratio table or on the table or on the graph to determine what the unit rate is. So let's look at this table. Again, it does not tell me the amount for one, so I cannot do that, but I know I can use either one of these ratios to determine the amount for one. I have several different ratios right here. Let's look. First, let's just write some of our equivalent ratios that's on the table. So in this case, that's one of our ratios. 224 miles in 4 hours, 392 in 7, and 560 in 10. It does not matter which one you use, but of course I like to use the smaller number, but it does not matter which one you use. All we're going to do is divide to determine which one is the unit rate or what is the unit rate. So I would go 168 divided by 3. 3 goes into 16 5 times, that's 15. 1, bring down my 8. 3 goes into 18 6 times. So we know in 1 mile or 1 hour, he drove 56 miles. So in this case, my answer would be D. Let's look at it on a graph now. Okay, last question. Let's look at it on a table now, or on a graph. So in this case, it's very much similar. First, I would look at my graph and determine the easy relationships that I can see. You want to make sure it hits your X and your Y axis. So let's look at this example. So again, if I look at my 2, I can automatically tell it's not directly on my path. So I don't want to use that one. I want to use one that directly hits my X and my Y axis. Let's go and look at my next one. Again, I have 4, but again, it doesn't hit directly on the X and the Y together. Let's continue. 6, no, close, but not exactly. 8, 10, I think 10 will work. So let's look at 10. So in this case, 10 pizzas will profit $18. So in this case, we want to figure out the unit rate for one pizza. So in this case, I would just simply go 18 divided by 10. We know 10 goes into 18 one time. I have 8 left over. And now I have 80. How many times can 10 go into 80? 8 times. So in this case, one pizza has a profit of $1.80. Here are 2 questions below that you can try independently. Let me know how you do, or if you have any questions.